And we're finally here. The regular season coming to an end in the NFL. Championship game in college football on Monday. Marc Lawrence joining me once again from Playbook Experts YouTube channel and playbooksports.com. So, Mark, it's been a long, enjoyable season. It's not over yet. One more game in college football, a bunch of playoff games, and one more regular season game in the NFL. But this is what everybody plays for. This is when things get jacked up for the postseason.
Unquestionably, Greg, it's like almost like we're a marathon runner. We made the final turn, and we see that white stripe, and it's the finish line coming up for the football season. And you almost don't want to cross it because you don't want the race to end.
Yeah. Thank
Sadly.
goodness for the NFL draft, and
Yes.
maybe even thank goodness even if you want to go to a different sport. Thank goodness that we have like March Madness coming up. So there's a lot of little kind of distractions that keep us going. But once you get to once the draft is over, that's when I really feel. That's when I feel it. That's when it's like you got May and June and July. That's when you start feeling, ugh. 3 or 4 more preseason nobody cares about, so that's that 5 month period in the summer that's really the lonely part of football. But and that's what I think is so great about the sport is that they make it exciting almost all year round thanks to free agency in the NFL and the draft.
It's funny you mentioned that because after the Super Bowl is over and just a little bit before that, during the course of the playoffs, we're getting things ready for our 2023 Playbook Football Preview Guide magazine. We're starting to lay all of that out now. Can you believe it?
There you go. See?
So after the Super Bowl, until we get to the draft, okay, it's grunt work. Okay, it's the charts, the statistics, the stuff that puts you to sleep, compiling it all. But then the draft gets here, and then all of a sudden, like you say, the juices start to flow again.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of stage to get there, but eventually we'll be pumped up for the next football season right after the draft.
Yeah. Well, again, one more week to go, and we'll see how it kind of finishes with the postponement on Monday night because you just found out before we started the recording that they are just not even going to consider playing that game over.
That's correct. That's the word of the NFL just before we went on. And, I guess maybe the decision in doing that, that can be torn apart every which way but loose. But I think it all probably came out to the fact, just from a logistics standpoint, that this was the easiest thing for the NFL to do without having to rigmarole their schedule, postpone things, move things around, and even getting back to that football game, if they did reschedule it, Greg, that meant Buffalo would have had to make the trip back into Cincinnati. Okay, that's those are a lot of steps to be had just to satisfy the resumption of that football game. So, some teams are going to not benefit from this. Obviously, Kansas City looks like they'll be the one that might benefit the most, especially if they win their football game this Saturday. They'll win the number one seed. Almost because Buffalo can't catch them. And it looks like Cincinnati would be the team that would take it hardest on the chops because of something like that, because they're likely not to move off of the number 3 seed. But something, when the playoffs all begin, that'll be all in the rear view mirror, and we'll be into the playoffs just for what they are.
And the thing is that, I think some fan bases might be upset as well, but based on how the players, what do they feel? I think that they are okay with this based on the situation, based on the fact that for obvious sake, it's been very personal to them. And so I don't really think that any of them are going to you're going to hear anybody from any of those teams stand up and go, well, I think we should be playing that game over again. I mean, nobody's even going to say anything like that because they understand. So even though the NFL isn't doing it because of the kind warmness of their hearts, because they are, like you said, they try everything in their power. If they could logistically put it together, they would, because it's just more money for them. And I would have wished that that's part of the reason that they have an extra week, for these exact, in the Super Bowl, they have the 2 weeks between the end of the championship game and the Super Bowl. And I would have hoped that's part of the reason that they should have 2 weeks between those games in case anything like this happens.
Well, maybe it creates a little bit with that buffer being built in like that. Maybe next year or shortly thereafter, we'll see the season starting a week early. In that sense, just in case we've got all these these safety factors involved here, and they can still schedule everything out and allow themselves an opportunity to do just that. But I know one person that is going to be ecstatic that they're not playing that game, and that's Skip Bayless. Okay. uh, I don't know. Did you read his comments about what happened when Hamlin went down and so forth and whatnot? He was right away, rather than getting into the player and the tragedy and the result. He was all about, let's resume this game. This game is real important. It's one of the most important games of the year. Let's get back on the field and resume this game. He's a classless turd, okay? And he talks only just for the sake of rhetoric, just to talk and to stir crap up. And
I don't really think anybody watches that show anyway, so I think we're all happy about that.
Well, but something, because we live in such a social world, it was picked up and it was tweeted out, and all that garbage. So
yeah,
it just shows the classlessness of the man. So anyway,
something we all knew already.
Right, exactly right. And it's not breaking news, right?
Yeah. It's amazing he's still on the air, to tell you the truth.
Right.
But, okay. So again, we're going to talk about how it is going to impact some of these games this week. Before we get started, just going to close up college football. And also, I just wanted to, because a lot of the times we talk about handicapping and matter of fact, Mark, you have a school for handicapping. How does, when you were putting that school together for handicapping, and I'm not sure exactly where it is right now as far as your, what you're thinking about doing in the future with it, but where are you right now with that? How is that? And I got to imagine that was really an idea that you were probably thinking about doing for a long time.
It was, because I love to help people learn to win, educate, and do all those types of things. That's a little bit of what you read in our newsletters and our publications, is all the handicapping nuances that go on, and teaching people how to do that and how to not make mistakes when it comes to betting their money, especially with legal sports wagering going on right now. But it's on hold right now for the moment here. More basically because we had a backer who backed out at the last minute, and it was hard to scurry about and find another backer with football season right upon us at the time.
Sure.
So, while I'm putting the magazine together here, I'll be also pursuing that during the off season here, and hopefully maybe before the start of next football season, I'll have better news to share with you.
Yeah, and again, I bring that up because I know how important something that project is to you, and I bring it up because we have talked about things of that nature, about little tips, handicapping tips, and everybody's different. Again, especially if you're not a type of gambler that spends thousands of dollars a year, but you're just a regular novice, few $100 during the season, or maybe $1,000 or $2,000 when it's all said and done during the season. And then we've talked about everybody has to have their own niche. Everybody has to have their own formula. And that's why I've shared my formula as far as what works for me in college football and what doesn't work for me, which has been mostly the NFL. That's why if you've noticed, the viewers have noticed, I had a formula that had a lot more money invested in college football, because I learned over the years, it's a lot easier for me to win in college football, especially because of upsets, because that's where you can really make your money. And that's where I made most of my money this season. And I just bring this up because of the fact that, we're all learning. We're always, just like the greatest coaches, the greatest handicappers, the regular Joe handicappers, we're always learning, of course, every year. And I decided, next year when I do handicapping on these shows, I'm just not even going to do NFL anymore. It's something where I don't feel I can make money off of it personally. That's just me. A lot of people are better in the NFL than they are in college, and vice versa. And so I've learned, I'm not going to get my ego in the way. Oh, yeah, that's okay. I'll get better next year. It's always, okay, well, didn't work out for me this year. I'll get better next. No. So after a while, it's like, no. What is better for you? Is it what system's better for you? What sport's better for you? And I think once you figure that out, I think it makes it a lot easier for you if you do it the right way to understand that, okay, I don't have to, I can say this is the team I like and so forth, but I'm not going to put money on it, or I'm not even going to put it out there like in some sort of handicapping report, because I don't need to do that. And I'm not going to share information to the public that I think is also not going to be advantageous to them if I don't think it's advantageous to me. So that's kind of the way that I'm looking at it, and I wanted to share that because I think it's important for everybody and every individual to kind of reflect themselves on what works best for you.
Well, how I look at it, Greg, is this way. And that's a question I'm commonly asked is, which sport do I like better and which sport do I do better at? Well, the answer to that is I do better at whatever sport happens to be working within the confines of what it is that I do, how it is I handicap that particular year. I had a great run in the National Football League for 8 straight years. This year's been a little bit choppy. College football really picked it up this year. In the past, college football had been a little bit choppy, and the NFL took over. And I kind of correlate it to an actor, like a movie actor, who is as good as the script that is written for him. Okay, and if you ask that actor, what he would prefer to be doing, comedy, drama, crime movies, his answer would be, let me see the script, okay? Because I can make anything work with a good script.
Sure.
Okay, and so what that basically means, I'm kind of getting into handicapping school and theories and thoughts, but what it means is if you have a good script and a good base of a plan of attack, it will work. Okay, it just depends upon, and then to what degree. Is it college working this year? Is it pro working this year? Or sometimes when you have a great year, it's both of them. So I'm not going to back out of either or because I've been doing it my whole life.
Of course.
So what I do is I have to go back and I have to hone my scripts. Okay, when the NFL gets a little choppy, I'll find out what didn't work and go back and work a little bit harder on that. So
yeah,
it's just all theory and in the approach to it. But you had a great year with college football. I know that. I saw your records, and I can completely get where you're wanting to stick with what's working well for you.
Yeah, and it also just makes a lot of sense too when we look at the overall formula of our shows on your channel and on our channel, and how that could work, and what also fits. Because, for instance, not many handicapping shows have a professional handicapper, a successful professional handicapper that is solely for totals, like
Correct.
Victor.
Correct. Right.
That the Victors of the world just aren't out there.
Nope, that's his bread and butter, right?
Yeah, and so what is his expertise and how that fits perfectly with your program? That again is why your Playbook ATS show has been so successful for so long, and that's why I was like, hey, you know what? Maybe it's a nice little niche that I can throw in some of the college football upsets on next year's show, and realize that might actually add to everything that you guys are doing over there at Playbook Experts. And so that's what we were talking about. That's what we're thinking of doing. Season's not over yet. I also love futures, and that's something that I've done for a lot of sports. I love futures because it's something that you can invest in over a 6-month period, 4-month period. And it's almost kind of like the stock market in a way. The odds go up, the odds go down. Where do you get the odds at the right time? And I kind of like doing that as well. And that's something that we'll probably talk more about next year. Just taking a look at, like, for instance, take a look at the futures right now. And I've said for the last few weeks that I've been putting money on Cincinnati, and they were around 10. They got down to 8-1. They're back about 9-1. So I've got enough money on them now between 8 and 10-1 that I feel pretty good. I thought the odds would have came down if they would have beaten Buffalo, but that didn't happen. So maybe that's still a good thing because I have an extra couple of weeks before I have to worry about those odds coming down. But with the Green Bay Packers, that's an interesting one in the NFC because the latest odds they had, I think, were 25-1. Detroit is 125-1, and I just find it so funny, and I understand why, but it just shows you that you got a game coming up that might be who wins gets into the playoffs, and one team is 25-1 to win the Super Bowl, and the other one is 125 to win the Super Bowl. And even then, I looked at Green Bay and said, you know what? It's probably not a bad investment. Because if they get to the playoffs, I do wonder whether or not that 25-1 goes down to 15-1 or something like that.
For sure it does. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm figuring maybe I'll invest it. But then, and we're going to talk about this, I looked at who their potential first round opponent could be. It could be the San Francisco 49ers. And I'm like, well, wait a second. They got to beat the Niners in round one
In San Francisco.
in
Yep.
San Francisco. So those are things that you have to, you can't just blindly, unless you feel you have a superior type team like the Bengals have been all season. It's a lot different when you have a team like the Packers. Oh, just if we can get in, maybe we can make a run. But then, hey, yeah, but who made they play in the first round? Could be San Francisco on the road.
Yeah, Green Bay played like they had COVID this football season here for the first half of the year. Now they've shaken the COVID. They got boosted, and now they look like they're a decent football team. But are they good enough to go on the road and get their way to the Super Bowl? That's a big, big task they have to ask of them. And the other side of the equation here is also that if you like Green Bay, you might want to do them now, basically because if Seattle wins their football game at 4:30 Eastern on Sunday.
Oh, you mean the point spread for the game?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Detroit's out. Okay. So it's going to be a path for Green Bay in that sense.
So you think Detroit might just kind of the line would then go up because Vegas would feel like Detroit is playing for nothing.
Correct. Yeah. Like Detroit will be laying down.
And they'll feel like it's a big jolt that they only could, what? I guess they'd feel it for, what, an hour or two before kickoff? They probably know the result?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe so. But I think that
if they had 24 hours, that might help them. But just to
Right.
know, like an hour before kickoff, whether or not you're still in the playoff picture, that's hard.
I still can't figure out why the NFL scheduled Seattle at 4:30 and Green Bay, Detroit at 8 o'clock, because it didn't make any sense at all. I mean, there should have been Jacksonville playing Tennessee at 8 o'clock. Regardless. Okay.
You know what? It's Green Bay. It's it's still, even if Seattle wins, which I guess most people believe they will. I guess either way, Green Bay is going to be playing for something. So they know Green Bay still has to win. They got to do something.
Right.
Maybe we don't get the Jacksonville, Tennessee. Both teams have to win. But they probably feel, well, who's going to watch? Who's going to care about Jacksonville and Tennessee in those markets compared to Lambeau and Green Bay?
Well, there is one caveat for Jacksonville. They can lose the football game and still make the playoffs.
Yes.
But they need 3 other teams to lose, along the way.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh, New England, and I don't recall who the third is.
Miami.
Okay, there you go. So if all 3 of those guys go down, the door is still left open for Jacksonville.
Yes.
Right.
And by the way, college football, before we move on, what nobody wants to see, and I think I just get the feeling that most people believe what we're going to see is a blowout. And we're what we don't want to see is we're somewhere into halftime or the third quarter, and Georgia's up by 3 scores, and we're sitting there and going, did you have to beat Michigan just for this?
It's 34-6 at the half.
I mean,
right.
Everybody loves an underdog until they lose a big game, and it makes the game that you're hoping would be a big game into a disaster. Everybody would love to see TCU knock off Georgia. Everybody would, unless you're a Georgia fan, everybody would love to see TCU at least in a game. But that's the thing that worries me the most, is that they kind of had their win, and now they're going to ruin it for the rest of the country by going to the championship game and laying an egg.
I don't believe they are, Greg. Personally, I don't believe they are. I think they believe in themselves. And they've also got, we mentioned this on our ATS show, they've got a little bit incentive here involved in this. And let's explain it to the listeners and the viewers out there as well, that the very first year of the college football playoff, when it initiated in 2014, before the Final Four teams were announced, the week before the Final Four teams were announced, TCU was the number 3 ranked team in the country. They went out and they smashed SMU 52-3, and they ended up as the number 5 team.
Yeah.
Ohio State vaulted past them. Okay, so that was an injustice in a sense. So maybe they're showing game film of that. Who knows what?
Hopefully, yeah. I hope so. Look, it's not like Georgia kind of did what we expected them to do. They struggled. They needed it was pure luck that Georgia won at the end, because they had nothing under their control. It was just, if the kicker makes the kick, it's over. Kicker missed the kick, and they're in the championship. And I will say this, everybody, look, Georgia fans, don't get angry at me, because they are clearly the best team in college football the last 2 years. Everybody knows it. But you have to have luck to be great as well. And when you take a look at how they've been in this spot the last 2 years, they lose to Alabama in the SEC championship game, when everybody thought that, oh, they're finally going to beat Alabama and they're going to show them. And then they laid the egg and they lose, and they were lucky to get into the playoffs anyway. And then they face Alabama. And then what happened to Alabama? All the receivers got hurt. So now Bryce Young's got no receivers to throw to, and they still almost won that football game. Yep. Ohio State beating Georgia. Second half, what happens? Marvin Harrison having a great game, gets decked in the back of the end zone. They don't call targeting, first of all. Second of all, he's done. He's out. Doesn't play the rest of the game. Ohio State can't move the ball as easy. Georgia comes back and wins the game. Georgia, if they win national championship, will have won both championships pretty much partly because the opposition's best players were not available during those games.
They were taken out of the game. Exactly right. Exactly.
So, but you have to have luck. It can't be all skill, and Georgia has the combination, and that's what you need.
Well, it was bad luck for Ohio State in the sense that the targeting call was not made. I thought it was egregious that there was not a targeting call. My goodness, I was wondering whether the kid was going to be paralyzed.
Yeah, it's terrible.
But anyway, it's not Ohio State that's here. It's Georgia.
Yep.
And I agree wholeheartedly with you. You need to have Lady Luck with you whenever it involves sports, whether it's watching the game, playing the game, or betting the games. She has to be with you. You have to have a degree of luck. There's no question about that.
Look at the Patriots. Their entire dynasty started with luck.
Yes, it did.
The Tuck rule.
Yep.
The entire dynasty. And again, Georgia's at that point now that maybe they just needed a little luck to get their dynasty going. And that's what's helped them out. So they got to close the deal, though, on Monday night. We expect they will. I said it last week, too. I don't know why TCU is 14-1 to win the national championship. And I put my money where my mouth is. I threw a few bucks on TCU to win the national championship. So, I didn't have to put much up. But I don't think they're going to win because this is what we talked about. They were 14-1 to win the national championship. Now I think the money line is less than 4-1. I think it's about 380.
Like plus 360, 380.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
So look at that. I got 10 points on just picking them and doing it a week earlier to win the national championship. So that's why I thought that was a no-brainer. Doesn't mean they're going to win, of course. But hey, you know what? Maybe if they have a really good half, I could hedge my bet a little bit. And that was the thing I was listening to, obviously, because I produced the show. You guys, you and Victor were talking about the over-under in the Detroit-Chicago game. And how Victor was saying how they were up.
Oh, what a brutal beat, yeah.
All early, first half. And all they needed was a touchdown. Like in what, the whole half, the whole second half or something like that?
The whole second half. They scored early in the third quarter, and all they needed was 7. Right?
Okay. So what I was thinking was, okay, well, if you have a lot of money invested, same thing with points. You could hedge your bet there, couldn't you have?
You could have.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's something to consider. That's something to realize if you are, same thing with over, under, whatever. And again, you have to have enough money. If you only have a small bet, doesn't matter. But let's say you have a few $100, $1,000 or something like that, when you have wagered on a bet like that, and you're in that situation where you only need 7 points, let's say, for a whole half, you might as well hedge the bet a little bit. So.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's always the safe way to go. I know a lot of people get like, well, I want to go for it, and like I said, I don't mind that. And when your investment is small, if you have a $200 investment, a margin or higher, why be greedy? Nobody's saying to put it in half, but hey, you know what? Maybe get your money back, your investment back. Maybe you put a $35 bet to make $200, and if you just go ahead and you place a hedge bet, you can get your $35 investment back. So
Sure.
just look at it that way. All right. Let's talk NFL and these games on Saturday night. Mentioned Tennessee, Jacksonville, not on Sunday night, so they're on Saturday night. And I just can't see how this is going to end well for Tennessee. Uh, Jacksonville's going one way, Tennessee's going the other way. But it's not just that. It's the fact we talked about this already. The GM's gone. Doesn't look like Mike Vrabel's probably going to be back. Tannehill's not even playing. He's probably not. So you have one organization that's already thinking about changes. You've got another organization on year 2 and really kind of like year 1 of their rebuilding project with Doug Peterson. So they've got all this positive energy and they've got the winning streak going. The other team has got the negative streak going with all of this conjecture about who's going to be the coach and whatever next season. I'd be surprised if Jacksonville wasn't able to cover this game.
I would too. My biggest concern is that this role that Jacksonville's on. Eventually you come back down, okay? And sometimes you come back down in games where it's obvious where you shouldn't have, where you should have just rolled. Like you said, 2 teams headed in opposite directions here. All the trends are to Jacksonville here in this game here as well. The situations that they're in. Last home games against division opponents, 5-0 straight up and against the spread. All the good numbers are there to Jacksonville. I would be stunned if Tennessee comes up with a big effort or a big game in this. I think what I'm most concerned about is Mike Vrabel. He doesn't get out-coached a lot,
Sure.
but he just doesn't have the players, and that's really what the whole situation is all about. And Derrick Henry, you really can't ever count on him.
Sure.
He could bust this game open and be the star of the game.
Of course.
230 yards, and
Yes.
Tennessee's moving on.
Yeah.
Capable,
And Dobbs is definitely a better quarterback than Malik Willis.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So they're in better shape there. So I agree. But yeah, I just think the thing that really put it over the top for me was I just think Tennessee is almost like 1 foot out the door already. They just don't know what's going on. And how much confidence could they have anyway about, oh, wow, we're in the playoffs with Joshua Dobbs. We're not going anywhere.
And they make the playoffs, they're going with the losing record on top of it. I don't think the NFL wants to see that either.
And they're not going anywhere even if they get there.
Right,
So
exactly.
yeah, I just don't like the vibes there. And the only thing I think there is to be worried about is just maybe is there a pressure? How much pressure does Jacksonville feel being the favorite? A lot of people believe they should win. They've never been in the spot before, these players. So how do they handle that? And if they get off to a really good start, it's probably going to be a blowout. So Tennessee's best chance, maybe Derrick Henry, second play of the game, 80-yard touchdown, and maybe you put a little pressure on him. I don't think it'll last either way.
I don't think so either.
Kansas City and Vegas. So you know what? You got to stick it to. Vegas has really just had an incredible, unlucky, and disappointing season. But there's a lot to be positive about once the offseason begins because they've lost 9 games by 1 score. 9. They've been in 4 overtime games, 2-2 in the overtime games. They're 5-2 ATS last 7. Kansas City 1-6 ATS last 7. Don't forget, this was one of those games Vegas should have won when they went to Kansas City. They should have won that game, and that was one of the games that they lost that they should have won. But yeah, we've talked about Kansas City, not a very good spread team, and that's why I'm going to go ahead and take Vegas to cover the spread.
I'm looking right now as we're speaking here about the situation with them not replaying that game, Greg, and how it's probably going to benefit Kansas City the most. Mm-hmm. In a situation like that, and I'm just looking to see if a line may have moved to Kansas City because of that in this particular football game.
So they were 9.5, correct, before that?
Yes. And I don't think let me find this here real quick as we're speaking here. I sort of expect a little bit of a push to Kansas City in this football game from the odds makers at least. My point here being is that if this game stayed within a 1-score spread of 8 or less points. You mentioned how these close call games that the Raiders have been in this football season, how they've lost 9 of them, okay? Kansas City's terrible in 1-score games. But the odds makers right now is 9.5.
Still
exactly.
9.5, okay.
9.5, right, exactly. So it'll probably go off at 10, which moves them out of the 1-score range. but I still look for a big effort by Vegas in this contest
Yeah.
here. This is a football team that didn't raise the flag, even though they could have many, many, many times for the science fiction type losses that they had all football season here with the head coaching disaster situation that they had there. The quarterback situation disaster. I mean, it was a novel, a science fiction novel that happened with the Raiders here. But they still have some talent on this football
Oh
team.
yeah. Yeah.
You know, and I think you're going to get everything they've got in this football contest as well. Kansas City is famous for winning games and not covering
Yep.
spreads. Yep, just famous for it, and it wouldn't surprise me at all at this with this spread being a division game. I'm going to back the home dog Raiders in this contest.
And by the way, since it's the first game of the weekend, I would actually even start a parlay on the money line because maybe, just maybe, if they're able to win this football game, it'll be like, oh, thank goodness. We actually have something positive in one of these close games against a really good team to hang our hat on and to just be happy about because they've earned it in a way. They really have earned it. And I mean, nobody thought they were going to be in a game last week with San Francisco with Jarrett Stidham at quarter, and they still took that team to overtime. So it's one of those things where I think, maybe they could just get some luck on their side and stick it to their arch rivals and get something positive going in the offseason. So.
But it would be nice to see the Raiders up in Kansas City. Then all of a sudden, here we go.
Yeah.
Everything starts to crumble. Here
Yeah.
comes the playoff resituation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it'll be neat to see if that happened.
Okay, and then speaking of the playoff situation, so again, Buffalo is hosting New England, and it's a 7.5-point spread. New England is about 275 on the money line. I'm favoring the Patriots and the number. I would even consider the money line in a parlay situation as well, and the reason is because we don't know how Buffalo is going to react, and I forget who it was. Somebody referenced the fact that, and I don't remember which player it was, but somebody referenced the fact that when something like this happened to their team, that they didn't really care about the next 3 or 4 games or the next. So they were so distracted. It was such in their heads that it was so. If that's the case, when you have a team that, yes, it's important, number one seed and all that, but really, is it when you've got, this weight of their shoulders potentially on them based on what happened last week? So it might be a major distraction for Buffalo that I'm just thinking that it's possible New England can at least cover, but maybe take advantage of it and steal the win because they're in the best position. If they win, they're in.
Well, this is not a win one for the Gipper type situation. First of all,
No.
Hamlin didn't pass. He's recovering really, really nice right now.
Yep. Great to hear.
So I think all of the the black cloud ugliness that happened over the thing is still going to linger just because they're out of their element. They're not doing what they usually do. The second thing is, it's most important, if Kansas City wins, they win the number one seed. Buffalo doesn't have that to play for. So, that would have been their driving point. If they'd have played Cincinnati and beat Cincinnati, Buffalo's the number one seed. But they lost it by this half game that they didn't play. Kansas City closes them out with a win on Saturday. So Buffalo could come flat.
There you go. So if Kansas City loses, that could sway your opinion on Sunday.
And so too will the line, okay?
That's true.
Yes.
Yes.
And so too will the line.
That's true. So you might want to, figure that out. I don't know. Maybe see what happens at halftime and then go from there. Maybe you could take it. Who knows? Do you think some places might take the line off the board?
No, they won't take the line off the board.
During the Kansas City game?
That's a possibility.
Some sports books might do it.
Yeah, some might do that just because they're chicken, right?
Yeah. They might. Yeah.
Yeah, they just might do that, but I think the play is to play New England now. Okay?
Now, yes, agreed. Yes. Right. And by the way, if New England loses, it'll be the second straight year that Buffalo knocks them out because Buffalo beat them in the playoffs last year. And so this would be an opportunity to knock New England, of course, out of the playoffs altogether. And we'll see what happens there. New England 1-6 straight up, 2-5 against the spread as a dog this year. And we talked about last week how they were really good as a favorite. So what it tells you is the Patriots have done a good job this season of beating the teams they're supposed to beat, And when they face teams that are more talented than they are, they, 90% of the time they've lost.
Yeah, they've
So,
been rubbed out. There's no question. And Belichick's been finding ways to lose money here the last couple of football games. He had his team in position to cash tickets and didn't do it. But I still, this is still Bill Belichick. It's
yep.
still Buffalo, and there's a lot on the line for the Patriots here. A lot more on the line for the Patriots than there is the Buffalo Bills.
I mean, because if you looked at that game like I did last week, the Miami New England game, that was an ugly football game. I mean, neither one of those teams should be playoff teams. I mean, with Tua, that's different. But that was just one ugly football game, and the Patriots were very lucky to win that game. All right. Now, the other team I just mentioned is Miami, and they're taking on the Jets. I have no idea what to expect from the Jets this week. Considering the Jets are out of it, they might actually play better. Because to me, and I said it after the Detroit game, that a week before most people caught on, that and I should know the pulse of my own team, that I felt that their confidence was shot. And it just got worse and worse and worse. Their confidence was just, they couldn't figure out, they're too young, they couldn't figure out how to feel confident that they could stop teams when they needed to, like they had earlier in the season. But now it's over. So now maybe the pressure's off and they don't have to worry about all that. And the Dolphins now have all the pressure, because you would think, all right, New England has a real good chance of losing. So all we have to do is win this game, beat the Jets on this losing streak. Well, we're both on the same losing streak, but beat this Jet team, and we're in the postseason. But again, no Tua.
Well, that's the problem. You got Miami unraveling at the seams here right now. No team has ever made the playoffs after going winless in December. So Miami's got that hurdle to have to get over here as well. And what is going to be their saving grace in this football contest here? They don't really have a quarterback per se.
Not yet. We don't even know who it's going to be yet.
Skylar Thompson right now, is
he might be the better option.
Well, he's the likely choice anyway, but he's terribly inexperienced. Remember, he's a seventh-round draft pick, terribly inexperienced. But so too is Brock Purdy. But Purdy fit into a team that's deeply talented.
Oh yeah.
Miami's not quite that way, and Miami's not playing the way San Francisco is. This is a real tough game for me, if for no other reason that the New York Jets do not warrant being favored.
Yeah, where did that come from?
No, it doesn't at all fit. Okay,
I don't understand that.
Just eliminated from the playoffs. I saw all the signs of this Mike White warping out, and it happened in that football game last week. And I don't see what's going to get better for the New York Jets here. There's not an incentive for them to play other than beating a division opponent here. I still think Miami, some way, somehow, guts this game out.
Okay, now if Miami loses and if the Patriots lose, that opens the door for the Pittsburgh Steelers against the Cleveland Browns. And last week, we talked about that trend of the underdog in the Pittsburgh-Baltimore series, and that continued. Can't wait to talk about it next year. Can't wait to put a boatload of cash on the underdog of that first Pittsburgh-Baltimore matchup.
Greg, it's amazing. Not only the underdog in the series, the closeness of the scores.
Oh, yeah.
There have been more three-point results in that series than any series in the National Football League. It's amazing how close those two football teams play one another. Probably because they're defensive juggernauts and they play a chess match, in a sense, if you will. And it probably was assured just given the fact that Lamar Jackson wasn't there to open things up.
Sure.
So, it was like no surprise to see that happen in that football game. And I kind of think they're going to waltz a little bit against Cleveland here as well. At least shut Cleveland down.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't think this game is going to be a three-point football game, but everything is on the line for Pittsburgh in this contest here. Not only the possibility to make the playoffs, but to keep the Mike Tomlin string alive of never had a losing season on top of all this. And then you got the Cleveland Browns coming in here who, surprised last week. Yes, they did. But we sort of saw it coming. We had that little anti-San Francisco thing working against Washington, where the teams that played the 49ers this year, they're now 0-14 straight up.
So who's that this week then?
It was the Raiders, I believe, last week, right? They lost in overtime.
That's right, the Raiders. Okay, so that's bad news for the Raiders. Okay.
Yeah, they lost in overtime. But at that point spread, there's still a lot of number to cash a ticket. I'll say that, okay? But I still think this is an ideal spot for Pittsburgh in this football contest here. They're going to come hard because of the Tomlin situation. If the playoffs are still open to them, they're going to come real hard in this football game. And the playoffs are open going into this football contest here. I think the Deshaun Watson thing is going to it has played itself out. He finally had a decent game last game. I don't think he has a career game by any means in this particular game, especially against this Pittsburgh defense.
Sure.
So give me Pittsburgh or give me death. One or the other.
Or you're staying away from the game.
Yes.
What's the winning streak up to now in the regular season?
For who's that?
Pittsburgh over Cleveland. Because I had in the Playbook magazine, it only goes back 10 years, and Pittsburgh had a 10-game regular season winning streak.
Well, that's a great point. I'm not quite sure on that, but I know they've dominated the series for sure. Cleveland with all those pathetic football teams that they.
That's true. Yeah, and then Cleveland, of course, goes ahead and beats Pittsburgh, and this is at Pittsburgh, by the way.
Yes.
So Pittsburgh has won 10 straight at home against Cleveland, except for the playoff game a couple of years ago when Cleveland beat Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. And here's another one from the magazine, and I've got about 3 of those on the show. Pittsburgh is 16-3 against the spread at home when they take on a losing division opponent coming off a win. So 16-3 home versus a losing division opponent off a win. So that's a big number there for Pittsburgh.
I'll give you one more out of the Playbook newsletter. Mike Tomlin, in his career at home in games when both teams are coming off a spread win and cover. In his career, 19-5 straight up, 18-6 to the spread. And if it's from game 12 on out, 9-0 straight up and against the spread.
Okay. Well,
that's
there
the
you
over
go.
again. Right.
Must be why Pittsburgh's one of my top picks of the week.
There you go.
But again, don't take my word for my best picks in the NFL. Okay, so also Cincinnati's playing Baltimore, sticking with the AFC. And look, we don't know how Cincinnati's going to feel either. So this is, look, I mean, I've been on them, as you know, for so long, and they've got a 7-game winning streak straight up ATS. So I'm not going to jump off now until they lose. But I don't think they're going to lose to Baltimore without Lamar Jackson. If they do, then it's all because of up here. So yeah, I still got to back Cincinnati. I'm just gonna guess that because they're not Buffalo and it's not that personal. Look, this is for the division title. Once they get on the field, they'll take care of business.
Well, it's really difficult handicapping this football game, like you said, because of the Cincinnati mental in the football contest. The fact that Tyler Huntley's not going to lead this football team anywhere in the playoffs, they're going to need, obviously, Lamar Jackson. And I think that's the real reason that we haven't seen him because they're trying to get him ready for the playoffs. Won't help them here in this particular football game. But I think it's all about fading Cincinnati in the mental approach that they are in this football game, especially now, given the fact that the opportunity to win that number 1 seed has been taken away from the Bengals.
Okay, that's I think. Oh, the one more thing that I wanted to talk about in the AFC, and that was the Houston-Indianapolis game. This is one of those games where both teams, it's like, no, you win. No, you win. No, you win. Because we talked last week about Indianapolis and how they were going to fold, that they were done. And the Giants kicked their butt, so it worked out exactly what we said, that the Colts, they're tanking the season, and right now they've got the number 5 pick, and they could end up with the 3rd pick in the draft if everything goes well. On the other side, Houston, if they win, they could ruin their chance for the 1st pick of the draft. So that's why I'm saying, you got both teams, organizations. I'm not going to say the players, but you have both organizations. No, let them win. And if anybody puts money on this game, you're just crazy. You're absolutely cuckoo nuts. I just think it might even be hilarious. You might see a situation where a field goal kicker goes up to kick the ball to win the game, shank, and then the next figure, shank. So that's one of these games. I don't know what's going to happen. I'd be crazy to bet this game.
Well, I could put 100 large in this game. It would be the Monopoly money, okay?
Yeah. Bet a tie.
Yes. And
because they did tie the first week.
Well, they did.
So maybe a tie. I don't know. What are the odds usually for an NFL tie?
Well, they got to be astronomical.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll put money on a tie.
But what you've got is Lovie Smith, who I don't think will let his team lay down. Maybe the order might come from upstairs that they
Sure.
insist that he lays down. I don't know. But the truth of the matter is there's no team in the league playing worse than Indianapolis right now because of the disaster that Robert Irsay has created with this Colts football team. They're obviously in tank mode. Why are they going to even come to play here, the Colts? Whatever their goal was, they're this close to attaining it. If it was stinking up the joint, because they'll have cemented it with the loss here against Houston in this football contest here. And my old adage has always been, late in the football NFL season, when you're playing two teams that are as bad as this, garbage to garbage, you play the dog. Okay,
Oh,
you can't lay points with garbage
oh, that's
football
true.
teams,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You can't lay points with the garbage football team. So put a gun to my head, give me the Texans, but it would be with monopoly money.
All right. In the NFC, all of a sudden, the Philadelphia Eagles. See, this is why I liked them last week, and I can't believe they just stunk up the joint because now they put themselves in this position where if they lose, not only could they not win the division, but they might be in Dallas's situation right now as the fifth seed by being in second place in the NFC East. So, and we still don't know if Hurst is going to play or not in this game. I get the feeling he's going to play, but the reason why, of course, they're trying to not play him is because they're hoping that they'll still win and they'll get the extra week on the bye to get him healthier. So we're trying to avoid having him play altogether. They could still get the number one seed if San Francisco loses and Dallas loses, but that's asking for too much. So I look. It's a lot of points. It's 14 points, and after the way the Eagles have looked without Hurts, I don't understand how you could put up 14 points.
Well, rest assured, you're going to see Hurts in this football game. They cannot afford to even think about losing a
No.
game with Gardner Minshew and falling to the number five seed, where they've been number one since the get-go. And the guys you're not going to likely see in this game are Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. Maybe to start the game,
Sure.
but not after the first quarter. Okay, their season will be done. But this is still nasty revenge for the New York Giants in this football game. And these two teams are bitter rivals on top of it. So it's kind of a hard game to get a grasp on because you figure it is the handicap would have to be the Giants and the need is the Philadelphia, but they always pack the need in this final week of the season as they have here. This point spread should be not a double digit favorite.
No.
No, this should be an 8.5 point line at the most. But now they're making you pay because Philadelphia's in this dire straits type situation off back to back losses. And here's the funny thing, Greg. And Andy Isco hit on this on our Against the Spread podcast, and he did. It was a great thing that he hit on. The over or the early week advanced line on the football game was Philadelphia minus 1.5. Okay, that was a week before they played last week. Okay,
1.5. Okay.
yes, it was. Okay, now why was it 1.5? Okay, because Philadelphia figured to win their game last week
Yes.
against New Orleans.
Yes.
And the Giants figured to not win their game, okay? Which would have meant the Giants were out of the playoffs, okay? And you would have got Philadelphia at a much cheaper price. Now what happens? Philadelphia loses, the Giants win, and suddenly it goes from a 1.5 point Philadelphia favorite to a 14.5 point favorite. That's how they overpack need in the National Football League. All based on that one early advance line that was out there in that balloon from 1.5 to 14.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
And another trend at the magazine, the Eagles are 0-11 against the spread as a home favorite off a straight up loss versus a division opponent with revenge.
There you go.
So again, 0-11. The Cowboys are a 7.5 point favorite against the Washington team, and I think Dallas is going to cruise in this one. That's definitely one of my better plays of the week. After what happened at Washington last week, and then the Carson Wentz experiment was a disaster again. There's just so many things going on there that's just not feeling good in that locker room for Washington right now over the past month, the way that they've let this opportunity slip of a playoff spot. And that the Cowboys know, again, that this is an important game. This is a game where if they win, they could end up with the number one seed in the conference. So, and on top of that, Dallas 20-3 against the spread as division favorites of more than 2 points.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong number right there, with incentive to play on top of it. So it's going to be really, really difficult I think, for Washington to get into this game and the fact that they were just eliminated from the playoffs. It was not a good week for Ron Rivera.
No.
No, from the asinine interview after the game to the point that he started Carson Wentz, who was a total disaster. The world knew it. He cost him a playoff spot, and now what's he doing? He's giving the ball back to Taylor Heineke. Too late.
Oh, that is the worst. Yeah. You can't go to Carson Wentz and now turn back to Heineke in
Right.
1 week.
No.
That's ridiculous.
Right.
That's terrible. And San Francisco, 14-point favorite against Arizona. So they can clinch the number 1 seed if they win and the Eagles lose. Arizona right now has a number 3 pick in the draft. So, they're going to do everything in their power to play as many goofballs as possible. But they have been competitive the last couple of weeks. But San Francisco's on a 9-game win streak. They've covered 7 of the last 9, but it still is a lot of points.
Yeah, it's a lot of points. It's very, very difficult stepping in front of San Francisco, who I think looks to be the team to beat in the Super Bowl this year. That's personally, I think they're the best team in the National Football League. And I'm saying that maybe with a caveat or an asterisk because of Brock Purdy.
Well, we just talked about it. Maybe week 1 postseason next week, Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers against Brock Purdy and the Niners.
There you go. And Aaron Rodgers has taken 8.7 points. I mean, oh boy, you know what I mean? Oh boy.
How enticing would that be?
Yes, it would be. Exactly. So, San Francisco is better when they check all the boxes except for the quarterback position. And it's only not because we're knocking Brock Purdy. It's because we don't know about Brock Purdy.
In the postseason, we don't know.
It's my favorite country western song going way, way back, Conway Twitty. And I love country music. We've never been this far before, okay? Well, Brock Purdy has never been this far before.
That's right.
Exactly right. So we're going to see what he's all about come playoff time.
And by the way, just want to remind everybody, we're going to have our playoff preview show next Thursday with Ryan Dunleavy of the New York Post. So Ryan and Mark, we did it last year. We're going to do it again. We're going to preview the playoffs, go through all the matchups in the first round, and obviously go over the futures and our picks, our Super Bowl picks and so forth. Okay, then you have Minnesota, who's a 7.5-point favorite against Chicago, and the Bears have lost 9 straight. So, they're going to want to try to get a win before the season's over to stop that losing streak. Any player wants to do that. Vikings are 0-4 ATS last 4. And again, from the Playbook magazine, Chicago 16-2 against the spread as a home dog of more than 4 points off back-to-back straight-up losses. And they're in that position with the draft that we talked about with Houston. So they can clinch the number 1 draft pick if they lose this game and Houston beats the Colts. So a lot of going on here. But unlike Houston, Chicago doesn't need a quarterback. So that's the thing, too. Chicago would just be loving to be in that position because they're just going to – does everybody have our phone number?
Yeah, exactly right.
They're going to be trading that pick away, and they're going to get a bunch of draft picks just because somebody's going to want to move up and get Bryce Young. But for Minnesota, again, from the magazine, 0-17 against the spread as division favorites of more than 3 off a double-digit ATS loss, taking on an opponent off a straight-up loss. 0-17 run right now with that trend. And then you get the 16-2 trend for Chicago, and they're meeting against each other, which is why I like the Bears. Again, even without those trends, I was going to feel good about the Bears, but that just seals it. By the way, the money line is close to 3-1 as well, in case you feel like maybe the Bears might be able to go all out and win the game. But I like the Bears in the 8.
I love how you ferret these numbers out from that magazine, Greg, and you pick the best of the juiciest of the stuff. And as you say them, I'm absorbing them because I haven't taken time yet to check them. So I know that you're going to hit on the, the main ones first.
Do it for you. Yeah.
That's a pretty strong stat, 0-17 to say the least.
Yes.
And you've got Minnesota here. You just wonder about this team because here's a football team that's won, is it 11 or 12 games?
12.
12. And they're a minus in point differential for the year. Are you kidding me? They've given up more points than they've scored this year.
Terrible.
Yeah, go figure.
But again, here's the thing, because this is tricky. All right. So San Francisco and Minnesota are tied behind Philadelphia, 2nd and 3rd. Oh, we got to get that number 2 seed. we get the first we'll get the first seed in the first round of the playoffs. Everybody wants to have the top seed that you can have. Yeah, but wait a second. If we have the top seed, which is the number 2 seed, next week, that means we're playing the Green Bay Packers instead of
Uh-oh.
the New York Giants.
Oh, boy.
Now, again, this is if the Packers beat Detroit. But so just imagine what kind of thinking might be going on at Minnesota and San Francisco about how badly do you want that number 2 seed, knowing the difference could be Aaron Rodgers of the Packers or Daniel Jones of the Giants.
Incredible. There's no doubt about it, right?
Yeah. I mean, so you might want to think about taking the Bears in the money line or taking even Arizona in the money line. I don't know, but I don't think I'd go that far. But maybe the Bears in the money line makes a little bit more sense because of that.
Well, you had that real great Bear numbers, that home dog number on top of it, and then you're also beating a team with a real shoddy defense in Minnesota. It's not like these bad stats and numbers we're talking about are sort of obscure.
Sure.
They're real.
Yeah.
I mean, they just played lousy defense, Minnesota does. So
that's why I was saying I could believe Chicago could pull up the upset, but Arizona upsetting San Francisco, that's completely different.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah, no. All right, so also Seattle. So Seattle, unfortunately, look, it's at least they put themselves in a position now after beating the Jets that they beat the Rams and they just sit there on Sunday Night Football and hope that Detroit pulls off the upset. If they do, Seattle gets in and not the Lions or the Packers, of course. I actually think this may not be a bad upset play for the Rams, though. Bobby Wagner, of course, is the linebacker for the Rams, the former Seattle Seahawk. And we know how much Bobby Wagner, talk about teams and players playing at this time of year. Well, Baker Mayfield's going to play hard. And Bobby Wagner is going to play hard. So I think the Rams are going to play some real serious football here to try to knock Seattle off. That's why I like the Rams and think that they might be able to pull it off, because even though Seattle won last week, obviously I watched the game and I wasn't overly impressed. I mean, they just won because the Jets right now, again, they have no confidence. They can't do anything.
The Jets were flat.
Yeah. So I think the Rams have played better than the Jets in the last month. So I could definitely see this being a little bit tricky for Seattle if they don't get off to a good start.
Especially with the pressure, right?
Yeah. Meanwhile, Tampa Bay, I don't know what to think of the Bucs once the playoffs begin. Obviously, we'll talk about that next week. They're at Atlanta. What do you think about them being a dog here? Because I look at this, and they are 500. So if they lose, they go into the postseason at 8-9. I don't know if they really care, but that is something to consider. Atlanta is Atlanta as well. They are in a decent draft position too. We talked about. I don't know. I don't think that Tampa Bay is going to just play all of the backups right away. I think you'll see a little bit of the starters early enough. And I wonder whether or not that's going to be enough for Tampa Bay to hold off Atlanta. I don't know. This is a game you probably shouldn't even take.
Well, I look at this game like Atlanta being the New York Jets of the NFC. They don't warrant being favored over anybody. Now they're coming favored over Tampa Bay, who has announced they're going to play their starters. Tom Brady's made the statement that we need to prepare, we need to get ready and approach this game like a regular game.
That would be good enough for me.
That's enough for me, okay? You got Atlanta's been horrible at home off a home game, just 2-13 to the spread in the second of back-to-back home games. And this is a kind of a neat stat, which comes to Tampa Bay in the National Football League. Teams in their last game of the season own a 500 exact record, and they're coming up in this football game as a dog off a win. There have only been 5 of them, and all 5 of them has cashed the ticket.
Interesting. So it does matter when you're trying to break that 500
for
on
sure.
The last game of the season.
They're playing for that winning record. Yeah. Exactly right. Right.
All right. So keep an eye on that for sure. Also, I believe we only have the last game, and that is the Sunday night game between Detroit and Green Bay. I wanted to talk about, and Packers are right now a 4.5-point favorite. But let's remember this: Detroit is 6-5 straight up. 9-2 against the spread in their last 11 against the Packers.
That's a pretty nice number. I mean, they're not intimidated at all.
Apparently not. And they beat him, of course, earlier this year that was the first game that started their current streak of winning 7 of the last 9.
Well, Detroit comes in here having won 9 consecutive times in a row to the spread in division games. The last 9 division games, all point spread wins for Detroit. And what you've got in Green Bay here, if you look, this is from our midweek statistical newsletter. You look at Green Bay and everybody has them coming alive, and all of a sudden, Humpty Dumpty put himself back together again. Well, look inside of how well he put himself back together again. The last 7 games they played, they've only outyarded one opponent.
Wow.
Green Bay has. Yes. Okay. So it's phony. Okay.
Was that last week?
That's my warning. Okay.
Against Minnesota. Had to be.
Yes. So be careful here. Okay. That's all I'm saying. Green Bay, sometimes it's the old, what I call the ABO theory. Always beware of the obvious. And Green Bay looks to be the obvious choice in this game. And I'm saying beware.
Yeah. I like the points. I don't know about the win because you just get the feeling Aaron Rodgers will find a way to set him up for a last-second field goal if he needs to. And it's experience against inexperience and that sort of deal. But I will say this, and that is the fact that I think a couple things. First of all, I would be a little bit concerned with Green Bay in the spot because of the fact that the last few years, Green Bay has not performed well at home in big lose and you're out scenarios. And let's say they win it and we get through that. I would then feel better actually in the postseason that they're going on the road. I actually think that as a dog, as a 7 seed, that maybe this is exactly what the Packers need to make a run.
Yeah, they're a road warrior is what they are, okay? Everybody knee-jerks to them. They're at home, division game, Aaron Rodgers, yada, yada, yada.
Lambeau Field.
Yeah, they don't cash tickets. Like Kansas City does not cash tickets. Wins the games, but does not cash tickets. Green Bay did a lot of their damage on the road here in coming alive after this horrific start that they had here. So I'm with you. I think if they win this game and they go to San Francisco to play the first game and they're taking 8 points, I'm going to look real hard at Aaron Rodgers. I can tell you that.
Absolutely. So, all right, that's next week. We'll be recording on Thursday morning, so we should have everything available by Thursday afternoon for our viewers to take a look at. Mark, what are you guys going to do for the playoffs over on your Playbook Experts channel?
Well, we're going to resume our weekly ATS Against the Spread podcast, which is nice. Victor, I, and Andy Isko. We'll keep everybody abreast on exactly what's going on. We're going to meld some basketball into that slowly as well, too. So a lot of good
can't
stuff.
Wait to do that. Yeah,
a lot of good stuff coming up on the ATS podcast. And you can check it out all online at playbooksports.com to watch those videos or go to the YouTube Playbook Experts channel to check them out.
Yeah, and speaking of Andy and his contest, because I know that's over once the playoffs begin. I'm getting into my first contest this next week, and that's going to be in golf.
Oh, nice.
Yes, getting into I'll talk more about it with you next week, but it should be a lot of fun. A lot of people like it. You put in an entry, and you can only use one player for the entire year. But, there's a lot of money paid out if you wind up winning.
Oh, real nice. Just an FYI, next time we do our podcast, you might want to talk with Victor because Victor was doing golf, and he was really, really good at handicapping golf.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he stopped it largely to concentrate on the totals and because there wasn't all that much of a market.
Okay.
But now it's a different era, if you will.
Sure.
And I don't know if Victor is still following golf, but I know he had a good feel for it. So next time,
reach out to him.
Yeah, reach out and see what he might, if he has anything to share. Right.
Because next week, what am I talking about? Tomorrow night is our first. We're doing a fantasy draft show, golf show with Jan Stevenson, former LPGA great, and Jared Smola from Draft Sharks. Of course, he's been on this show for football. So that's going to start, and we're going to be doing Jared and I shows every week. Jan will make special appearances, but tomorrow night's our first show, golf show. Nice. So I'll talk to Victor and find out whether or not it's something that he'd like to be a part of in some way. So that's interesting. That's great. All right, Mark. Playoffs next week, and let's hope TCU gives Georgia a game.
Let's hope they do. That would be 3 for 3 with the college football championship games all being exciting. That's what we need, a hat trick.
Oh yeah, that's true. They
Sure.
were exciting. Yeah.
Yes, they were.
My team lost as usual, but it was exciting. Yeah.
It was
All
an
right.
exciting loss.
It was
Yes.
an exciting loss. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Mark. I'll talk to you next week. Enjoyed it as usual.
Hey, Greg, have a great weekend. Be well, stay safe, and I'll catch you next week.